Every date, first comment is how tall I am. Limits the options quite a bit because ideally I'd love to.
Do you feel it does?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so much so.
For you so that's also so fascinating to me. Is it you feeling like less options for you or men are just like, she's too tall? Hi, I hope you're doing well. I have a great episode for you today. Understanding and decoding human beings is always a challenge. We are complicated creatures. But add to the mix the incredible pace at which the world is changing and how technology is affecting how we interact with one another. And it's no wonder that dating is so challenging for so many people in this day and age. I have conversations about this sort of thing all the time with my friends. And that is exactly what I did here with my friend Elena Tabor, who is a YouTuber based in New York City. I will leave links to her work in the description and show notes if you're interested in checking it out. And having said all of that, I hope you enjoy. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Me too.
There's a richness to this, that I find so fascinating. I talk about this a lot with my friends behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit difficult capturing conversations sometimes publicly because, not everyone wants to go into their insecurities or, you know what I mean?
I feel you.
But I think we have a really rich topic here, and we've talked a little bit about this, even in the last couple of days.
I don't even know what you're going to say yet.
Well,
I don't know what you've chosen.
I don't even know where exactly to start. I think a really interesting starting point is talking about the fact that, you're an above average height woman, and I'm a below average height guy.
Mm-hmm. Very unique experiences.
Yeah.
Existing in the world. It really does change the way you interact. The way people interact with you, spaces, places. At the end of the day, yeah, it's height. It's not that big of a deal. But I do think we both have experienced what it's like to, obviously be on those extreme ends and how it can affect certain aspects of your life. Yeah. So I think we bring a unique perspective.
Okay, so drilling down into this, how tall are you exactly?
So I am 6'1" without a shoe on. Wow. And for context, it is very difficult to find a cute female shoe that does not have 2 inches. Yeah. So when I'm often going out in the world, I literally try to find short shoes, but it's really hard. So I feel like when I exist in the world, it's often as someone who's very close to 6'3", which is intense. But.
So in centimeters, I think 6 foot is 183.
Yeah, so I think I'm 185.
185, wow.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, flat foot. I'm pretty sure I'm 185.
And so with shoes might be closer to 190.
Oh, wow, yeah, gosh. I'm tall, y'all.
I'm 5'6". Mm-hmm. And so in centimeters, that's 167, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
167, 168. And so, that is, especially in the United States and in Europe, that's below average height.
Oh, yeah.
I think the average height of a guy is 5'9". Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on the country. And people are getting taller, too.
Yeah. I think the average height of a woman is 5'6" in the States. Okay. Or 5'5". Okay. So I'm a solid 7 inches taller than the average.
Yeah, which is 20 plus centimeters. Yeah. So what has that been like? Was that difficult for you growing up? Was it an insecurity? Was it oh my God, I feel different? Or was it not something that affected you or that you noticed?
Yeah, no, a little bit of both, of course. I never had that massive growth spurt, which I'm grateful for. It's not like I sprung up at age 12 or something. I very gradually grew, and then I was pretty tall by the time I was a senior in high school and 18. And there's pros and cons. And I think it's funny when it comes to height is I'm never going to be the one that brings it up. I forget I'm tall, but people love to comment on it, honestly, daily. Really? It'd be very rare I'd go a week without some comment from a stranger. Wow. Which is it's just for whatever reason, it's societally acceptable to say, you're really tall to someone, but not to say you're really short. So
I was going to say, I don't ever get comments about this.
I don't know what it is. Maybe they think it's an observation I haven't noticed, perhaps. And so, no, there's pros and cons to it. I think now as somebody in their mid-20s, I'm I love it about myself. I'm confident about it. It is what it is. But it can definitely shape certain parts of your life. For one, just I can never blend in. And there's sometimes where you just, depending on the day or the mood, all you want is to just be a fly on the wall. But I'm always a head taller than the vast majority of people in the room, men included.
Yeah, you said this last night when we were in the, in a sort of club. Yeah. Yeah. So we're in New York right now where Elena lives.
Yeah.
And we connected in Paris last summer. And it's really cool to crash at a friend's place and kind of see
Yeah.
their universe. And it's funny because like
See
I
the
wouldn't,
chaos.
for me, I don't go to the club. Like I
Yeah.
just don't do that super
Yeah, yeah,
often,
yeah.
but it's fun to enter somebody else's
See what it's
universe.
like, yeah.
And it was really interesting. You know, you made that comment when we were dancing.
I was like, look, I told you.
I think you said you were the tallest person.
I was the tallest, and on average, everyone was at my shoulder, so I was quite literally a head taller than everybody in the crowd.
That's an experience I've never had.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What if we swapped for a day somehow?
Yeah.
Modern science, you never know. It'd be fascinating.
But there's a lot you said that was really interesting there. Like, for example, the fact that you cannot blend in.
Right.
Now, is that something you yearned for at any point? Or was it just like, you know what, this is how it is?
I think definitely at given times, I'm like, oh, it'd be really nice to just
Like when you were younger or even now?
intermix, definitely. More so when I was younger and less secure in myself, you know, a lot of growth. And I see the benefits of being so tall. I think just in certain scenarios, it can be frustrating. Like music is a huge part of my life, as in like live music. Concerts are my favorite thing in the world. And I always feel like I'm a burden there because I'm like, I like the artist and I also would like to see them from a somewhat close proximity. Just because I'm tall doesn't mean I want to be, you know, hundreds of people back.
Yeah.
But then there's always shorter people who get frustrated, or I just feel like I'm really annoying and in the way, but I'm just trying to like make myself small and enjoy an experience. Or going out also, usually with music in mind. I promise I'm not some club girl, but I do love good house music and dancing with my best friends. And so in scenarios like that too, sometimes it's nice to just like feel like you're getting, you know, lost in the music with your best friends. And I'm always kind of like, "Ugh," I'm always a head taller than my friends too. I'm
So
like,
it takes you out of the moment a lot.
it can. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do to get back into the moment? Are there things you say to yourself like this does not matter?
Yeah.
Or
It's usually fleeting. It's not super defining. But I'm just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do the tall girl lean where you kind of like, if you're a tall girl, you'll know. You're like kind of pop a hip and you like kind of bend a knee. And in theory, it makes you an inch or two shorter. I don't know how much it actually works, but I do a lot of the tall girl lean in the moments. And that's when you know I'm probably uncomfortable, is when I'm kind of like, okay, tall girl lean, to like try to make myself.
I guess throughout my 20s, it's been fascinating to me observing the differences between men and women, like in a heterosexual, obviously all of this, the whole context of this conversation is kind of through that lens. But it's just so funny that like you're thinking about how to make yourself smaller sometimes,
which
right?
is really sad as I said out loud.
I'm having the literal opposite.
Right.
I'm like, I gotta stand tall.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time, I made no effort. I'd wear Vans, and that adds no height at all. I think for me, it's been a journey of just not trying to correct it, but really accept it and just move past it, you know?
Absolutely.
But I'm asking you a lot of these questions because there was a ton of insecurity for me around this. But it's funny that it happened a little bit later on. I didn't notice this much as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I think there were comments that I was a smaller kid and I knew my parents were both shorter. But I didn't really pay much attention to it, and I had big energy and I had a really supportive family. So I just kind of focused on that. And then when I started more seriously thinking about dating, which happened a little bit after like
I
high
second
school
this,
and whatnot, it just became this obsession at one point where I was like, oh my God, I'm short.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like average woman height kind of,
Right.
you know, and going on the internet is the worst possible thing for this sometimes
gosh.
because all you'll find are forums of people, you know, all the stats, like on average, a woman will look for a man that's 4 inches taller or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I feel you.
I really had to go through this personal journey of
Yeah.
self-acceptance,
Absolutely.
you know? So was it like that a little bit for you or?
Definitely. No, very similar. I think a lot of it was tied to dating. I didn't date until a bit later, and then I had a long-term relationship, and I think I thought about my height honestly much less. And then I've been like pretty, you know, single off and on for the last, you know, year and a half plus. And so it's felt more relevant again. But I think I've learned too with time, and like, especially as a woman, it's like we're taught to take up the least amount of space as possible,
Right.
which I'm just so tired of. And so a lot of it has been like, I just want to fully accept the space that I take up and that, you know, I deserve and just embrace it. Which was definitely a journey to get to that point. But I feel like I'm there, and it, you know, you continually keep growing in that regards as well.
How do you think you got there? Was it a lot of like
Yeah, I think just
self-observation?
self-observation, you know, the pros of it. There's a lot of fun elements of being tall as well. Like sometimes it is fun to stand out. Like sometimes it is, you know, it is like an advantage. But just accepting this is me and it's not going to change. So like let's learn to love it and find the pros and, you know, take a take up space.
How often do you think about this then when you're dating? Like if you're
Oh my gosh, it's actually really hard. It's relevant. Yeah,
so it is something that comes up a lot.
definitely.
Like in your head, or guys are saying this to you?
Both. Every date, first comment is how tall I am. I mean, if I've met them in the wild, as I say, they already know I'm tall. If I met them on a dating app, which I used, but I don't use very much, my height's on there, so they're aware. But still, it's always the first comment is the height. Or like I said, if I go out and I want to meet somebody at like, a bar or like a gallery opening, like I look around and I'm like, okay, so I'm taller than everybody. This is interesting. Limits the options quite a bit because ideally I'd love to.
Do you feel it does?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so much so.
For you, or so that's also so fascinating to me. Is it you feeling like less options for you, or men are just like, she's too tall? Like, what do you think is
Probably more so the
limiting?
former, because I'd love to look someone in the eyes. That's the biggest thing.
So it's difficult.
So they could be an inch or two shorter, but I want to be able to be looking down at a romantic partnership.
Right. Yeah.
So it limits it, which is funny because I feel like there's so many women who are so much shorter that don't want to be able to like look at a man in the eyes. They want to only look up. And I'm like, y'all. I'm like, it's great. It's great when you're on the same eye level.
Well, you could find like a basketball player or something.
I know. Let me just, right. Let me go hit up some team practices.
Yeah, but I think this is interesting because it's like the whole conversation about preferences too is really interesting. I don't know if I can share this, but your sister's dating a guy who's shorter, so that was really interesting to talk about that.
Yeah.
And honestly speaking, for me, I think I do have a slight preference towards also being taller, or at least the same height.
Yeah.
But it's not a hard rule.
Right.
Like I have dated women that are taller than me and even like significantly taller than me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like we can talk about, I was making this reflection the other day. In an ideal world, you find someone that matches this kind of somewhat arbitrary criteria list that you have. But that's not really how the world works. And I find that at the end of the day, like these are maybe preferences, but there are much more important things, I think, when it comes to matching with someone.
And that's what's so scary about current dating culture is that it's usually stripped down when it's online dating to the most like rudimentary elements of like your face, your job, your height, your age, maybe your college education or whatever it is you do. And like a few photos, which is really scary because I think some of the best connections I've ever had with people are people I've met out and about. At which point I'm like, I don't care if they're 2 inches shorter, like there's a good connection. But if it's on a dating app, I know the way I view it, the way men view me, the way my female friends view dating men who are, again, talking the heterosexual realm of dating, it does, it makes more of a difference when you're swiping or when you're deciding, even though, in theory you could miss out on a lot of incredible connections, but it's like, you don't know. And that's what I hate about modern dating.
It's just, oh man, it's just bizarre because we're like the first humans to even have this many options anyway.
Yeah, oh gosh.
And you don't need that many options. Like one thought I had was, it's so bizarre to me that I'm worrying so much about being a shorter guy. I mean, actually, I don't worry about this anymore, but like when this was a thing that really was consuming me a few years ago, because I was working through the insecurity, I was just like, damn, there's so many beautiful women that wouldn't even consider me for my height or whatever. But on one hand, that's actually a really positive thing because it filters out a lot of people that care about that above other things.
I completely agree.
But bigger than that, really all you have to find is like one really good match, right? Like it's weird that we're worrying about what lots of people think when in reality it comes down to a very, very small number of connections.
Oh, absolutely. You should quote.
Oh, from the
what we talked
Before
about.
Sunset.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. So second film in the Before trilogy, which I highly recommend.
Yeah.
I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's like when you're young, you think you're going to meet so many people. It seems like there's endless opportunities. And it's only later on that you realize that you only have a few really special connections.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I think that's really true. I definitely, even as, again, I'm 26 for context, entering my, mid-ish, coming on late 20s, that definitely has felt like it's reigned more true than I expected. Where it's like, I don't talk about my dating much life, so y'all are getting the tea on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're open to sharing this.
I haven't talked about my dating life much outside of when I had a long-term relationship, just because we were together for so long. It was like, I didn't showcase it a ton, but didn't hide him either. But
Was that weird to share a relationship publicly online?
yeah, I was.
Do you regret that?
I don't regret it. No, he actually like preferred it for a while. I was completely hiding it, and he's like, "Wait, this is kind of weird. Like,
Interesting.
I'd like people to know I exist because you're important to me, and vice versa." I was like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah.
So it was kind of out of respect for our connection of being like, "Hey, this is a special person," and not being like, I don't know, not hiding somebody who's special to me, especially because it was like 3 years. And so pros and cons to that. I think you can do it tastefully. I will never be someone who's like, here's everything about my dating life.
Yeah. But when that ended, did it make it doubly difficult because it was
It
public?
did. So many people were like, where's this person? Where's he at? What's up? I'm like,
So moving forward, do you think you'd do that again, or you would have
only again if it was a really serious relationship. Because I don't regret it because it made sense. Like I was with him for so long, but I've dated people shorter times, and they've definitely never been shown.
Yeah. Shorter in terms of like length of the relationship.
Yes, that's what
We're
I
not
mean.
talking
We're
about
not
height
talking
anymore. Okay. You have dated
pivoted.
guys that are shorter than you though?
Like an inch or two, dating loosely, as in maybe gone on maybe like a month or like gone on a series of dates.
If you found someone who was like a perfect match in every other way, but they were like 4 or 5 inches shorter than you, would it be something that you
I'd
feel-
consider it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If it's amazing connection, like it's so hard to meet somebody out there who meets all those criteria. For someone that like, I think about this a lot. My friends joke about it. We're like, how did all of our parents, the ones that are thankfully together and still happy, which, is not always.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do our parents do it? Like you have to find somebody that for one, you think they're interesting, you think they're smart, you think they're attractive physically to you, your lifestyles align, your values align, your views on maybe finances and family in the future and where you want to live and like the way maybe you see religion or you don't see religion, your families connect. Like there's so many factors that have to align to meet somebody.
Yeah.
So that really you could build a future with. It's so much more than a swipe and being like, this guy's cute. So if someone was much shorter and aligned in all those ways, I'd be like, hell yeah, like let's try this out because it's kind of like the quote you were saying.
Yeah. The
It's
special connection.
rare. Yeah. To find that real special connection, it's less common than you think when you're younger, I feel like.
So why do you think dating, oh God, this is a hard question, but why do you think dating is so difficult nowadays?
Oh my gosh, variety of reasons. For one, it's difficult when you're picky. I think a lot of people, for better or worse, maybe stay in relationships or get in relationships out of the want of, comfort, of not being alone. And I think if you're willing to settle, it's a bit easier, which I don't mean to upset anybody, but,
I think that's the truth.
Yeah,
I think
that
it's
it's better
the
to be
majority
alone
of relationships.
Yeah, right? And I think it's much better to be alone and face yourself and grow or whatever the case is than be with the wrong person just out of like a comfort blanket of sorts. Yeah. So,
but that in and of itself is so challenging. I find that there's multiple facets to myself, and I think there's a big piece of me that welcomes the independence, and getting to learn and grow and whatnot, right? But there are moments where,
oh, of course,
like loneliness will pop up, and you're like,
that's the human. I think that's most people's, not everybody. I think we have a lot of people. It's like that's part of being a human.
Yeah.
I think most people, again, not all, crave that type of connection.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, like I totally do too.
Yeah.
But to answer your question on why I think dating is so hard, I think, and especially living in a city like New York where it's notorious for having a very tough, weird dating scene, I think there's just too many options. Like that's the beauty of dating apps is you do meet people you've never come into contact with, but the grass is greener. There's always somebody around the corner in theory. And so a lot of people are scared of commitment or like to have many options at once because it's this kind of like never ending cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really interesting that I had no idea that there was such a gender imbalance in New York, as you said.
Yeah.
But really, you said 3-1?
3-1.
If for like
eligible, there was some stat that studied like eligible, like people wanting to date.
Yeah.
So.
And there are way more women in
way more
New York.
3-1. And I can vouch because I have some stunning friends who are really fun and cool and down to earth and successful and beautiful who just dating has been rough. Like just have met a lot of duds or haven't been respected or have met people who are great. And then after 3 months, they're like, I can't do a relationship. Like I'm emotionally available or like, I don't want to commit.
Yeah.
Like, so.
But what I find so fascinating, I think it's so good to hear that side of things because, I have my perspective.
Yeah.
Very much informed by my experience as a guy. And I've had my own complaints, my own like reasons or explanations for why it's so difficult.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to hear
The
your
other side.
perspective, the other side.
I wanna
I had
hear
never
yours. Your
well,
turn.
just, okay, so I think that like dating apps, it does seem like
Mm-hmm.
there's more of an onus on men to make and just in
Yeah.
general, to make a move.
Yeah.
Right. And on dating apps, I think there are stats about this where there are a lot of guys, a lot more guys on these
Yeah,
apps than
yeah,
women. And so
yeah.
women get to be more selective, right? And I think this happens often in nature.
Yeah.
Not always,
Right.
I'm generalizing, but so, and for me, it's always been a little bit difficult accepting that,
Yeah.
it's my own kind of emotional trigger that I have to work through, I think, or am working through. But feeling really replaceable is
Oof, yeah.
horrible. It's a
Yeah.
horrible feeling. And, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, I think look how cozy we are on this couch. I
know.
love this.
It's a great couch.
The
isn't
view
it?
of New York out the window. I love this. I find it really fascinating. Do you know what MGTOW is?
No, inform me.
I think it stands for Men Going Their Own Way. It's like a community on somewhere on the internet,
I'm
on
intrigued.
Reddit or whatever.
I'm a little nervous.
Yeah. And, you've heard of Red Pill, right?
Like,
It's like from The Matrix, I think.
I mean, I know it from The Matrix, but what in
Right. Red
relation
Pill
to
is kind of
this?
like awakening to
okay, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
reality
Right.
of what's going on.
Society.
Things are unfair for men. But then
Yeah.
I also have seen the exact same thing from women.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see it on Twitter or someone sharing a TikTok where a woman's saying, like, yeah, all men are
Right.
at least a little bit bad, and she's seems
yeah, these
bitter
big
from the.
generalizations.
But I think it's fascinating to me because it seems like, again, in a heterosexual dynamic,
Yeah.
rejection from the other sex is insanely painful, like
Yeah.
insanely difficult to
Yeah.
navigate. And for many people, the coping mechanism is to try to blot it out or say,
Right.
like, I don't want
Blame
this
or
anymore,
whatever, yeah.
because that rejection is so difficult.
Agreed.
And I think that's why this is such a rich topic, because it is this eternal thing that we're all trying to navigate. It's referenced so often in music and in films and whatnot. I think it's easy to fall into your own little bubble saying, oh,
Right.
this is so difficult. This is so unfair. But I think it's difficult for everyone.
Oh,
It
yeah.
seems to me like it's difficult for everyone.
I think, yeah, no matter what, how you look, what job you have, how nice of a person you are, how great or funny your personality is. Yeah, it's tricky across the board.
Yeah.
Especially in a place like New York, like, I feel like you get the extremes. So you have the most successful people, the most beautiful people, the most talented people. And I can vouch for people in those categories still struggling to find somebody who's a really quality match. I think what also has been stripped away is just empathy. Again, it's different. Like, in an ideal world, it'd be great to like have a friend set you up with one of their best friends. Like, there's that common connection. There's like some level of respect. But I think dating apps have completely stripped away empathy and a lot of respect in a lot of ways. And I've been bad too. So like, I'm not saying, I haven't been perfect.
Bad in what way?
I mean, as in like, well, I was going to use examples of what's happened to me where I've had people fully set up a date on a dating app.
Oh.
And then the day rolls around or whatever. And I like go for follow-up, like, oh, is Tuesday still happening? And like, no response.
Oh, yeah.
That type of thing. Or they cancel an hour before. And because we haven't had this face-to-face contact and because we're all going in theory on different apps and dates, whatever, there's this kind of like feeling of like, oh, it doesn't really matter, like whatever, like on to the next. Like there's kind of this lack of empathy and respect. And like, there's some people that maybe I didn't like and I haven't like fully ghosted people, but like the slow fade where I'm like, I could have handled that better. And I'm trying to be better if there's somebody that I'm like, to let them down in a mature and respectful way and be honest, because I'd rather have that. I'm like, we got to slowly change this dating culture one person at a time. But I think that's what's missing.
The code of ethics is so...
It's non-existent.
It doesn't
it's
exist.
left the chat.
Yeah. And I find it so fascinating how, there's not like a clear way to behave. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's always good to behave with respect and whatnot, right?
Be nice.
But even understanding someone's motives when dating is a whole thing in and of itself, right? Because people will act in one way, but their behavior doesn't reveal what they're really looking for, what they're really going for, right? The classic like dude who just wants to hook up and then disappears or whatever, right? I keep thinking about, going to the gym the other day and seeing all of those really good looking people.
It's true.
Super fit.
People are hot in New York, I'm not going to lie.
And it's very strange. Like it just reminds me about the strangeness of the world and how competitive things are and whatnot.
Kind of feels like a Black Mirror episode at Equinox on Bond Street.
Yeah.
For anybody who knows, it's kind of niche, but it's like Black Mirror. Everyone's like very
crazy.
attractive and successful and young, and
Yeah.
it's weird. It's like a alternate universe.
And there's this bizarre dichotomy that exists between, like, clearly we have eyes like in the front of our faces. So all that is visual captures our attention, right? And so they play such a big role in how we navigate the world and make decisions and whatnot. And yet it's really not something that you should let, at least in my experience, inform all of your decisions.
Yeah, completely.
Because it doesn't ever take into account all the incredibly valuable things that exist under the surface, right? I was telling you this, like, for me, it's so much more important if a girl's 5'4", 5'8", or whatever. It does not matter at all for me compared to if she has this kind of desire to learn and grow and be self-reflective and is ambitious and is creative and things like that.
Yeah.
Those things matter so much more.
I know. That's what dating apps don't show you. I'm like, that's what's most important is somebody's, personality and character and how they are, if they're loving and caring and vice versa and, ambitious, intelligent, adventurous, but you don't get that.
So why are you on the dating apps then?
I'm actually not at the moment.
Oh, cool.
But in the past, I've used them because a symptom of my lifestyle. I work in my room alone 5 days a week. I work in a female-dominated industry at least in New York, because I work, across the board content-wise. But when I'm in New York, the events I go to primarily are fashion related.
That's true.
There's not there's no tech YouTuber events in New York, or they're very rare. So I'm in almost always female-dominated spaces, which is great, but not great if you're maybe trying to meet somebody organically. And all my friends primarily are straight women or gay men or some straight men, but not ones that I'm trying to date. So my access to the dating pool within New York is quite limited. So in the past, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of the option if you want to meet somebody. But I'm not really on them. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah.
I think the best connections I've had with people are people I've met in the wild, as I said earlier.
Totally. Well, that one gigantic piece that you'll never get from a dating app is like that kind of vibe check.
Yeah.
Like,
right, where you can kind of tell instantly.
is it just fun talking to you or
exactly.
not? Do you feel like things? I mean, what advice do you have on navigating this?
Goodness.
Like, I don't want to be all like down.
Right. I know.
I think the go-to I've continually had is that it's good to be picky and that it's
absolutely.
It's
Keep
good.
your standards high.
Yeah, and if you can kind of explore being independent and not needing the love and validation of someone else to be able to feel that for yourself.
I think that's I know it's cheesy, but I really do think you have to do that first. You can absolutely grow in a partnership, 100%. But I think if you want to meet the right person, you do need to make sure that you're good on your own.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, at the end of the day, it's just you're with yourself. Even when you're in a loving relationship, at the end of the day, it's you in your head for the rest of your life. So it's like, you got to be good with what's going on in there. Yeah. And, make sure you're comfortable and you're healthy in that regards. Yeah. And I think, with that in mind, ideally things will align. And I kind of trust that. Or I'm like, when the timing is right, like I'm not worried about, dying alone. Like I trust that I'm like, no, I'm doing my thing. I put myself out there. I'm becoming the person I want to be. And like I said, I've met some really incredible people along the way, which has shown me, and it didn't work out necessarily for a variety of reasons, or maybe it was just nice for that period of time, has shown me that I'm like, yeah, you just kind of have to trust the process, trust the universe, whatever cheesy line you want to use. But, I think in time, it all kind of works itself out, and you have to put yourself out there. Yeah. Like I have some friends who want to date, but have done like absolutely nothing, like won't use an app, or they don't go out, or whatever the case is, whatever works in your environment. And so I'm like, you do have to push past your comfort zones and do the awkward thing and put yourself out there. Maybe say hi to somebody first, Maybe use an app as much as we have just shit on them, but.
Well, I think it's funny because it's easier from an outside perspective. I had a friend tell me this. He's like, I'm not worried about you, but the drama, I don't know if you have the drama.
Oh my gosh, that is so accurate.
And I'm like, I'm not worried about you.
I'm not worried about you either.
So
but then me and my silly little head, I'm like, sometimes I'm like,
clock's ticking
I'm like,
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, why is things not working out?
One thing that really, and we
so
also
funny.
talked about this before, but like one thing that really I find keeps me on my track, on my path here, is observing existing couples around me, right? Or people that are dating. Some are beautiful. Some, there's a really gorgeous connection there.
But like no
support,
shade.
loving.
Like I feel like way more than not. I'm like, I'm good. I'd rather be alone.
I was about to get to that. Like, how often do I see people throw out their own self-worth in an attempt to try to make some sort of dynamic work? And it's kind of sad.
Goals and their future in a lot of way.
You know? And to be honest with you, like, it's easy for me to criticize others. Like, I have fallen into that trap myself. And it's, you know, there's so much to be learned from reflecting on all of that instead of jumping into the next thing immediately. It's
We talked
tough.
about dating a lot.
What?
We talked about, we've gotten in deep with the dating and I love it.
I just
in the
think-
last 48 hours too of hanging.
Yeah,
you know?
for me, it's a pretty ubiquitous topic
it is.
for people our age. Like, I think
absolutely.
it's rich. It's so interesting.
It colors every element of your life. And I think it's like the most, we were both saying too, it's like we're a bit more analytically minded. Like I'm not somebody that's like very emotional, but love and relationships is, it's the strongest of emotions you can feel.
And you
to a certain
can't be
extent.
analytical about it.
And that's the thing. I always say that. I love having, control over parts of my life. Your love life is the one part, no matter what. It's not up to you. Like, well, I mean, it is up to you, but you can't control it in the way of like, I'm going to work harder to hopefully achieve this career dream, or I'm going to go to the gym more to maybe be healthier, or whatever. I'm going to read more books to learn about a topic I'm excited about, etc. It is an area that you try and you just hope. You hope that you meet somebody who's a really lovely match. But it's out of your hands in a lot of ways.
I'm coming to the conclusion here. I mean, I have a general sense of some of the things that I find attractive, but I am coming to the conclusion here that I know less about what I really am compatible with. Like, I'll have ideas for what I'm looking for, and then I will meet someone that's like that. And even if everything matches or checks off on paper, that doesn't mean shit, you know? So...
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you were kind of referring to that a little bit with regards to not being able to control your love life, but I feel like in a sense you really, I don't know. I never connected with the people. Maybe it depends on the kind of person that you are. Some people are able to just like chomp through 1,000 dates and kind of find someone.
Right. Oof. I cannot. I don't have enough time for that. Let's be real. I'm also interested. We talked about it, I think, a bit the other day, was like dating as a content creator and like finances and dating. What's that been like for you as somebody who has like this public facing life to a certain degree, dating? Like, is it weird being like, hey, I'm a YouTuber? Like, do you have trouble explaining that to maybe somebody you're interested in? Does it feel vulnerable that they already have access to so much of your inner thoughts in a way?
Yeah.
Or has that not really been anything? If anything, maybe it's flex and you're like, that's right, I make videos.
Well, it is. I don't know if you've had this experience, but it's like an immediate imbalance. I mean, it is weird that I'm sharing my life publicly online, and that there's an imbalance from the get-go. You can definitely get past that, but I guess it's tricky because someone might have an idea already formed about you before you have any chance to kind of just like hang out in real life. And I think one thing I've been kind of noticing is that you really do not get a sense for a person just by their digital presence. Like, just watching your videos, like knowing you in person, I'm like, okay, that's
makes
her.
sense. Same person.
But just watching your videos and then meeting you, it's like there's so much information that I have access to just being in your presence and how you respond and like the eye contact and the energy that you don't have just digitally, you know? So it's been a bit weird. And I've also honestly, like, I've flip-flopped between, do I present this information up front? Like, I have a weird life. Like, I make videos about what I do and whatever. Or do I not present that information right away and kind of focus on, not like hide that, right? But just focus on other facets of myself.
Right.
I don't know. Have you struggled with this? Like,
I usually do the latter.
Really?
I kind of hide it. I'm not trying to be sneaky by any means, but I think especially.
What do you say? You're like a photographer or something?
I keep it vague, honestly. I usually say like I work in marketing or I work in like social media marketing. I do film or like film
Not
within social
untrue.
media marketing. Yeah, it's true. And it is what I do in a very broad way, or maybe even like creative strategy for brands. I never lie, of course, but I want someone to get to know me before they form this perception. I think especially as a woman, people are like, oh, you're another influencer. And when you hear the term influencer, especially as a gal in New York, there's a million stereotypes that pop into someone's head.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of them are pretty negative. And I'm like, I don't necessarily want to be grouped within that. So I'm like, get to know me. And I'd like to think with my content, I try to make it educational, inspirational. I try to provide a lot of value. You know, you can make any type of content you want, but I think I don't fall necessarily in like the stereotypical category of
Yeah,
like,
you
female
don't.
influencer.
You really don't. And
so,
but what's really difficult to capture about all this is that, like, yeah, okay, you'll go to the events and you'll talk about all these different things. I told you this last night. You know, and you could, from an outside perspective, sort of have this judgment of like, oh, that's
right.
superficial or whatever, right? But again, it comes down to an energy thing. Like, I do not get that sense from you at all.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, same
it's
for you,
and it's fun to be plugged into some of these
Right.
things, but at the same time, I sort of get the perception that you,
It doesn't really matter.
yeah, it doesn't really matter,
all.
you know, and it's not like
It's not that
you're not
big of a
above other
deal.
people or
Oh
anything
my
like
goodness,
that.
no. Yeah. So it's like, get to know me, like get to know what I like, I don't know, like, you know, I'd much rather, like, I love reading and crosswords puzzles and a Vogue event is nice, but I go for 10 minutes and then I feel kind of socially anxious. I'm like, I'd rather be home with my like best friends. And so I love for someone to just get to know me at a face value before either they stalk my life or they form.
I also wanted to ask you, I don't know if we talked about this actually already, but you know, your channel, you've been working at it forever, right?
Yeah.
It's been like, you started in 2015 as well?
Yeah, that's when I first technically started, like uploaded my first video. It was 2015. And then I took it a bit more seriously starting probably like early 2017. I was still making videos throughout 2015 and 2016, but I like kept it consistent probably around 2017.
So it's grown tremendously.
Yeah.
And you know, it seems like it took a little while to get going, but now it's really rolling. You know, just still on the topic of dating and whatnot. Has your income ever been a challenge for guys? I find this so fascinating because I think like it seems like it's threatening for a lot of guys, and women seem to hate that. You know, where if a woman's making more money than the guy in the relationship, and I think what's even like beyond that, that's fascinating in and of itself. But it's also fascinating that a lot of guys will say, "Yeah, I'm not worried about that," but then but in the actual situation, they might feel a bit threatened.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one. I think, it's complex. It really comes down to the person. I mean, I have no problem with making more money. I'm like, you know, I think that's great. Like, I think it comes down to
how plugged in and ambitious they are.
Yeah, how plugged in and ambitious they are. I think that's what I care most about in regards to somebody else. We were saying even the other day, I'm like, honestly, I couldn't see myself. I mean, it would be nice. Yeah, in theory, whatever. It's nice to be well off. But I really couldn't. I'd much rather be with somebody who works hard at something that they love, still is finding success in some regards. Because I'm like, you and me, like, we're working hard. Like, I'd love to meet somebody who's also finding their passion and like doing it well and like really working towards a goal. But like dating somebody who's like some finance bro, which a lot of women are looking for, who make a crap ton of money, I wouldn't want that. I'd much rather have somebody who's on a similar level to who I am and can also still be a very loving, supporting partner, as hopefully I would be as well, and can be really plugged in each other's lives and not have like work be like the forefront. So this idea of, you know, maybe, which again is another one of those New York City extremes. A lot of people are looking for that in New York. Dating somebody who's like super well off is very uninteresting to me. And in most dating scenarios, I don't think it's been a problem. I think some people are a little thrown off guard. But I think at the end of the day, it shows too, I'm good with my finances, I invest. But hopefully it shows a little bit more of who I am in a positive light and like the things that matter to me. And I feel like in the place I am and the way I view finances, I'm like, I just think about, I want to be secure in myself for my entire future. That's why, I invest and save the way that I do without the regards of like anyone else will be part of that picture, as in I'm not depending on somebody down the road. Like I never want to be dependent on somebody. And if someone else comes into that picture, like, I think that's a great way to share like the fruits of my labor. So I have no problem with that. I think there's so many beauty so many elements of beauty that come with this job, like travel and getting to bring a +1, that I feel like a lot of people see past too.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's actually pretty great.
This is another example of how, it's much easier to measure how much somebody makes versus the degree to which they're passionate about what they do, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot harder to capture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet again, I think an example of how the world of dating today, just it's a symptom, I think, of the 21st century and the direction we're going, where we really try to measure and control everything.
Yeah.
And you can't measure certain things. There's a lot of things actually that you cannot measure. And so, but I'm with you. Like I think most people actually would agree with what you're saying.
I think so too.
It's just that it's really easy to fall into the trap of like what you can see, and creating a narrative in your head about what you're looking for, what matters to you, you know?
I feel like I'm kind of expecting to make more than whoever I really connect with down the line. Because we are in a unique job, which I'm very grateful for.
But
Shout
you're also
out YouTube.
so ambitious, and I've seen you work too. It's like you're really after it.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I do work super hard. Like I definitely work hard for it. And YouTube is a lot of hard work, but also a lot of luck, privilege, whatever you want to name it. Like, getting lucky with the algorithm and hopefully making good stuff along the way. So I already kind of have that mindset. So I'm like, it doesn't really matter that much to me. I think it's also can matter on how you're raised. I feel like my parents ended up together because they had very similar values. But they also knew they were going into roles because they worked in nonprofits my whole life. They knew, and my mom knew marrying my dad and vice versa, that it was going to be a very simple life. But they they loved each other and they were doing their passion. And that was like what was modeled to me growing up.
Wow. Yeah. So on this topic, I guess we're kind of moving in this direction here. You are really vocal or really transparent about finances. And there's a degree of like, you'll do like investment videos and whatnot. Do you find that like it's difficult to talk about these things as a woman on the internet? Because I've had comments from women, because I did my series on the apartment, for example,
Right.
like side comments from other like women influencers that have said something kind of like, wow, it's cool that you can talk about these things. The reaction wouldn't be the same if I did this.
Interesting. Okay. I see what you mean. My first thought was like, I love it. I'm like, there was a huge gap in the market. I was tired of hearing a bunch of white men talking about finances.
Exactly.
And I was like, I want somebody who looks like me, that's going to talk like me, to tell me about this extremely important subject.
Yeah.
And I was looking around on YouTube and there were a few. I'm trying to think. Like one of them, Rose is one of them. Sorella Moore does some finance stuff now.
She does.
It's more recent. Financial Diet. But just to shout them out, so you guys check them out.
Financial Diet's based in New York, right? Or no?
I think so. I don't know her, but she does finances and she seems badass. So check them out. Yeah. But in general, there was nobody else. And also what it came down to is I was having a conversation with all my gal friends in person talking about like, oh, are you investing? Like, have you capped out your Roth IRA? And they're like, what is that? What's a Roth IRA? I was like, okay, let's have a conversation and break it down in the most simple terms, because there was also a lot of shame and embarrassment and fear in not knowing. A lot of people, they thought investing meant you put it in a risky stock and you could lose all your money. Or they were embarrassed because they're like, what really is a stock? Like, what does that mean? And I was like, let me break this down to the most simple terms and talk through the very basic steps to investing. I'm not giving advice on who to invest in per se, but I'm like, there are a few basic steps to follow that can transform your finances that really aren't that hard. You don't need a financial advisor. You can do them on your own. Let me break this down in a very digestible way for a large audience. And now it's like, I think it's like my second most watched video is like how to invest, or like investing for beginners in your 20s. And it was really fun for me to make. It was something I was already really interested in. And I think it's hopefully had a positive impact. I feel like that's like the video a lot of people that come to the streets are like, oh, I loved your finance video. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad. I hope that was helpful.
So generally a much more positive reaction then, huh?
Very positive, yeah. I think it comes down to showing your, like, if I showed my rental price, which I'll do, that's when there's kickback a bit, as would be more similar with your situation with the apartment, because I think it's showing more so your personal finances and how you're spending them or how much you've made. And that's when people are like, they get frustrated for whatever reason. That's a whole can of worms, if you will.
But do you think that's just down to like, how expensive New York can be and the imbalances of the world?
Imbalances of the world,
So it has less to do with you being a woman.
There might be more backlash for a variety of reasons, which would be like, you gotta look back like culturally and historically about why we're programmed to think the way that we are, especially in regards to like female.
Trying to get at. Like, do you feel that's at play?
I don't really have like the male counterpart to compare it to, but I will say yes. In a lot of regards, I think it is very possible that it leans more negative in certain directions on the female side concerning maybe like your own successes, especially financial successes, and maybe the material goods that you've decided to invest in. I have some great books recommendations out there too, like The Beauty Myth and Invisible Women. Really great books that kind of, I read them like 2 years ago, so I feel like any example I'd pull from it, I'd completely butcher. But those are really amazing books on kind of how we view women in an almost subconscious way because of the way that like culture has shaped our viewpoint, which kind of touches on that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I like how you have such an active approach to your own life. You know, you're like, I mean, even just what you just said like 2 minutes ago, like it's a lot of white dudes explaining to me.
Exactly. I'm like, let's change that.
Why can't I talk about this?
Yeah. But I think it's more so, it's less about like the nature of like a gender role. And I think it's more about like historically how we've set up industries and how they've slowly formed over time for better or worse. I
don't know. I'm definitely like I'm open to the different perspectives and theories that people have on this. I feel like I was always allowed to explore and express freely. I don't know if this somehow feels related, but like I would wear like pink shirts and stuff like that. I was really into the arts and theater and whatnot as a high schooler, and my parents like didn't care, you know? And I feel like then I gravitated towards like the self-improvement space on YouTube was super male dominated, and it's cool to see that has kind of grown and evolved. But that kind of happened by accident. I didn't intentionally do that. Maybe there's something there to that where I saw other guys doing this, and so I did it as well. And so just getting to see other people. That's why representation is so important at the end of the day. I think, we're seeing that more in like the greater pop culture world, but it really does matter. Like when someone else shows that someone that looks like you or seems like you or is familiar can operate in that space, you're like, oh wait, I can do that too. Yeah. And it just kind of takes. And I think that's wonderful, but I do think that I suspect there will always be imbalances in the world. I don't know if you can live in if it's possible to create a perfectly balanced world. Not anytime soon. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. What about your creative process then? How do you feel like you're heavily influenced by other creators about what you come up with, especially like in that self-development and improvement world? Like through the lens of if it's mainly men or women, or what do you mean? I guess more so in general. Yeah. Yeah. Part of it is just happens by itself. Like it's just absorbing a lot of different influences. And then sometimes I'm like, wait a second, you know, like I had a friend telling me, he had the realization like so many artists throughout history are men that he, that he pulls inspiration from. Also because there's so few female documented artists, historians. And that's not an accident, writers, right? Like it was just so much more difficult. And so he like sent me a link to Georgia O'Keeffe's Incredible. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I can pull inspiration from these different sources as well, if that makes sense. Yeah. So but in terms of creative process, I don't know. I think I try to absorb as much as I possibly can from as many different places, you know? But not YouTube. Settling on something that you're like, oh, not YouTube. Okay. I try to change it up. I think inspiration for me comes a lot more from real life. You know, living my life and observing different interactions or different moments with people or different experiences that I've had to pull from life instead of so much from social media, because it does feel like things can get super repetitive. So it's true. Yeah. Yeah. How about you? Like, do you? Yeah. We make quite different content, so it really depends. Yeah. For context, anyone who hasn't seen my channel, it's a lot of like travel, lifestyle, vlogs, apartment tours, sometimes financial education, sometimes book content, sometimes more like research-based projects. So yeah, you touch on a variety of topics. Yeah, maybe I should narrow those down. I'm a bit spread through it. Why? I've always said it's good to be three-dimensional, you know? Like you're not just one. No, agreed. I don't want to ever just be one thing, but sometimes I spread myself too thin, and I'd rather be really good at a few things than be jack of all trades type of thing. But it depends on the content at hand. I kind of have like different like slices I feel like I pull from. So if it's my travel-based content, I usually try to film
as I go and as I'm just experiencing this location, and I don't really have much of a plan when filming. My plan comes while editing, for better or worse. Sometimes it's a pain in the neck, but that's when I kind of create the storyline. And it's more me just trying to capture the essence of a place and then figuring out how I want to showcase it, how I want to talk about it. And a lot of it comes down to the editing style as well, and like what feelings I want to evoke. Or for example, we talked about this a little bit. Me and my sister, we filmed this project. I was like circling the Mediterranean in 40 days and showcasing all the different sides of the Mediterranean. So the European side, but also as well as the Middle Eastern side and the North African side. Specifically, though, highlighting the lens, highlighting it through the lens of local women who live there. I think the travel space, which is probably like my biggest slice of the pie, is still super male dominated by a long shot, or at least from my experience, especially people that are going to maybe places that are outside of the normal, like, I'm going to Italy vlog.
Do you think it's down to the fact that it's a little bit more difficult being like a solo female traveler?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a different experience. I've traveled solo quite a bit. Such a different, even me and my sister traveling together in parts of North Africa, I'm like, I've never been harassed so much.
Really?
Oh yeah, because it's such like a patriarchal society, and like the stares and the comments were atrocious.
Wow. Did that sour the experience?
I knew it going into it because I've already traveled a lot, and that's kind of what I wanted to highlight, is because the men making videos, they're great. Like, I love it. So I'm not trying to be like, one's better than the other by any means. But it was like, again, it was just like, I saw this was missing. I haven't seen something like this specifically highlighting local women. I've seen a lot of really incredible travel YouTubers, men and women, of course, going and showcasing their experience. Or I feel like I've seen maybe more male YouTubers showcasing more local men's stories. Not that they're choosing a gender. It's just what's happening naturally. And I'm like, honestly, I care way more about knowing what the female experience is like in these places. I was actually watching a Yesterday video a while ago, which we love. Shout out Thomas and Amar. They're amazing. And it was an older one, and Thomas's girlfriend at the time grabbed the camera for a moment and was like, yeah, as I'm walking around, like, I'm noticing I'm the only woman here and everyone's staring. And Thomas is like, wow, I didn't even realize, which I thought was like such a poignant moment in regards to like what me and my sister wanted to create. Is like, I want to show what that female experience is like in these places as a female traveler, but specifically women that live there, because my audience is mostly female. So I want to be like, for one, look, you can do it. And also, here's the realities of living in these different places. Here's how we're similar and different. Here's how history has connected these regions over time and how they've overlapped really not that long ago. Like the Ottoman Empire was really not that long ago. And a lot of these borders were very different. And how, culture and religion and all of that intersects is fascinating. So that was the goal for that. So something like that kind of came from a variety of things, the interest in history and, a greater cultural understanding, maybe a moment like that in the yesterday where I was like, oh, wow, like a little light bulb. I was like, wait, I want to capture that other side of that experience. And I think they're somewhere in the Middle East, I believe.
Oh, so that
maybe
idea was
Iraq.
Sparked by that moment in that video?
I can't say necessarily that was the case, but I did draw from that as we were doing more planning. I probably loosely had the idea in mind. And then seeing that moment, I was like, wow, okay, wait a second. Like, I love Yes Theory. Their work is incredible. And so I'm so inspired by what they do. But I was like, it's all, again, I'm not trying to be like, rah, whatever, women's rights. But I was like, all male crew, most of the time, like even their editors and everything.
Totally.
And it's one side of the perspective, a great one. It's incredible. And I love what they say, but I was like, okay, let me explore maybe another side of the coin here.
There's a missing perspective here.
So it's a very long-winded answer about how some of my ideas come about. Some of them are just very day in the life New York City vlogs.
Yeah, totally. First of all, I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
But it definitely reveals how often you can just easily forget exactly, like a different perspective. And it requires a conscious effort, I think. Yeah. Right? I'll tell you, so far it's been more guy guests for this podcast even. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to just be too in one direction. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I know it's most people, it's not, they're not thinking a certain way, like, oh, I'm only going to do this. Yeah. It's just, it's the way we interact with the world and the way we perceive it. And it takes somebody kind of like poking at that bubble for you to be like, oh, like, let me shift my perspective, or like, let me try to see something from a different point of view. Yeah. But when you're stuck in your own headspace and mindset, it's really difficult to shake that up completely on your own. And I think when you don't make people wrong, they're so much more receptive. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's huge, because I think there can be a degree of anger at the unfairness. And it sounds, it's, for me, your approach is a lot more effective. Because I hope, more so out of like education and love and inspiration. And
I hope so. Always from a positive light. In my case, anger's not my state of being by any means.
Totally.
So I'd rather just make something that I think is really cool and hope that it's received well and be something that I'm proud of.
But going full circle here,
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier to fall into the trap of anger or like repulsion, like with MGTOW or, the women, the TikToks, like I said, that, all men are bad. And I think, unfortunately, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you put out that energy, then people are going to be more negatively receptive.
Yeah, I agree.
I
always think more effective change comes from ideally being gracious and open-minded. There are a lot of people out there who have right to be angry for a variety of situations. But for me personally, the way I want to approach different subjects and moments is ideally more sort of like grace and, hopefully also like research. Like I want something to be like well-informed and a more positive and light I find to be effective in my own personal experience. So, but
I think an important key piece here is the way to expressing like with grace your message is working through the insecurities, because I think if you don't do that, my insecurities in the moments where I'm like, oh no, I'm short and therefore I'm ugly or whatever, it colors your perception of the world, and it kind of puts you in a frame of like, I'm a victim and this is the world's fault.
Yeah, I know.
When in reality, it's like, I think I'm okay accepting the fact that, you know what, like some women have this kind of preference towards taller guys, and that's okay. It's clearly not every woman.
Yeah.
We've got the Tom Cruises of the world, But I definitely think that I can only be lighthearted about this and accepting of this by having kind of done a little bit of internal searching.
No, definitely.
Because what is it I'm looking for? I'm looking for validation.
Right.
In no world, and nobody in the world, can you get universal acceptance from everybody? It's just not how it works.
You're not everyone's cup of tea. Like you're not gonna be everyone's cup of tea. So figure out what works for you.
Yeah. I think that's like a good stopping point there. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And this
was fun.
This was fun.
Thanks for coming to New York.
This is really, I feel like I got to do this more often on couches. This is a very different experience.
If you're listening to the audio version, you got to check out the YouTube version. See us on the couch.
Hell yeah.
We're really comfortable right now.
Yeah. This is an amazing couch. I slept on this couch for the last 2 nights. Couch. I slept like a baby.
I know. And you know what's crazy is my landlord left it because he didn't want to deal with moving it out. So I got it for free.
Technically own it? Or
for now.
Like
a never-ending lease until I move out, which I'm fine with. I don't want to have to deal with a couch. Anyways, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be a guest on this podcast.
This is awesome.
Huge fan. Love your work.
Cool. Thank you very much. That was a conversation with Elena Tabor. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, I will leave links to her work in the description and show notes, as well as ways that you can support this podcast if you're enjoying it. Also, this podcast is available anywhere that you can listen to podcasts in case you just want to listen to it, if you're watching it on YouTube or vice versa. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.